What happens when Hollywood's most genuine star sits down for what should be a simple promotional interview, only to face a host determined to tear him down on live television? It only took 31 seconds for Stephen Colbert to push Mark Wahlberg past his breaking point, creating one of the most shocking moments in late-night television history. The Late Show studio was buzzing with its usual pre-show energy. Audience members filled the seats, cameras rolled into position, and backstage, Mark Wahlberg adjusted his tie one final time. He had done hundreds of these interviews before. Tonight was supposed to be easy. He was there to talk about his latest film, share some laughs, and connect with fans. What he didn't know was that Stephen Colbert had other plans entirely. The show's theme music faded as Colbert walked to his desk with that signature smirk plastered across his face. The audience applauded politely as he settled into his chair and shuffled his note cards with deliberate precision. "Ladies and gentlemen," Colbert announced to the crowd, his voice carrying that familiar mock authority, "our next guest is Mark Wahlberg, star of the new action thriller coming out this weekend." The applause grew louder as Mark walked out from behind the curtain, waving to the crowd with genuine warmth. He had always been good with audiences, his working-class Boston charm putting people at ease immediately. He shook Colbert's hand firmly and took his seat, settling in with the confidence of someone who had nothing to hide. "Mark, great to have you back on the show," Colbert began, but there was something different in his tone, something sharper than usual. "Thanks for having me, Stephen. Always a pleasure," Mark replied, his Boston accent adding authenticity to every word. "So, tell us about this new movie," Colbert continued, glancing down at his cards. "Another tough guy role for Boston's favorite son?" Mark laughed, missing the subtle dig entirely. "Well, I try to pick characters that challenge me. This one's got some real depth to it." "Depth," Colbert repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. "That's interesting coming from you." "The first red flag." Mark's smile faltered just slightly, but he pressed on like the professional he was. "Yeah, people might be surprised by some of the emotional range in this one." "Emotional range," Colbert echoed again, this time with a barely concealed smirk. "Now, Mark, I have to ask, and forgive me if this seems blunt, but don't you think you're being just a little generous with that description?" The studio fell silent. Even the audience seemed to sense that something had shifted. Mark blinked, clearly caught off guard by the sudden change in tone. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?" Mark asked, his voice steady, but his eyes now focused intently on his host. Colbert leaned forward, his elbows on the desk, fingers steepled like he was delivering a lecture. "Well, let's be honest here. When people think of Mark Wahlberg movies, they think of explosions, one-liners, and you squinting at things. Emotional range isn't exactly the first thing that comes to mind." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Mark sat back in his chair, processing what he had just heard. This wasn't playful banter between host and guest. This was something else entirely. "Stephen," Mark began carefully, "I think if you actually watched the film, you might be surprised." "Oh, I did watch it," Colbert shot back immediately. "Saw it at a screening last week, and honestly, I kept waiting for this emotional depth you're talking about. Instead, I got the same Mark Wahlberg we've seen for the past 20 years. The audience was completely silent now. This had gone from interview to interrogation in a matter of seconds. Mark's jaw tightened slightly, but he kept his composure. "Look, I respect your opinion," Mark said, "but I put everything I had into this role. Maybe it just wasn't for you." "Maybe," Colbert agreed with mock thoughtfulness. "Or maybe, and hear me out here, maybe you've been coasting on the same tough guy persona for so long that you've forgotten how to actually act." The words hit like a slap across the face. Mark's eyes widened, and for a moment, the mask of professional courtesy slipped completely. He stared at Colbert in genuine disbelief. "Excuse me?" Mark said quietly, his voice dropping to a dangerous register that anyone from his old neighborhood would recognize immediately. Colbert, either oblivious to the warning signs or simply not caring, pressed forward. Think about it. How many movies have you made where your character's entire arc is just you being angry about something? How many times have we watched you squint your way through emotional scenes that require actual nuance? "Stephen," Mark said, his voice now carrying a clear edge of warning, "I think you're way out of line here." But Colbert was on a roll now, feeding off the tension he had created. "Am I, though? When was the last time you took a real risk as an actor? When did you last do something that couldn't have been played by any other action star with a Boston accent?" The audience was shifting uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a public humiliation, and everyone in the room could feel it. Mark leaned forward, his hands gripping the arms of his chair. "You know what, Stephen? I came here tonight to talk about my work, to connect with people who appreciate what I do. I didn't come here to be insulted by someone who's never stepped foot on a movie set. Never stepped foot on a movie set? Colbert laughed, but it was a cold sound. Mark, I've been interviewing actors for years. I know good acting when I see it. And what I saw in your latest movie wasn't it. The tension in the room was now thick enough to cut with a knife. Mark's famous temper, the one he had worked so hard to control over the years, was beginning to show through the cracks of his professional facade. You want to know what I think? Mark said, his voice rising slightly. I think you're trying to make yourself look smart by tearing down someone who's actually out there doing the work. Colbert's smirk widened. The work? Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like you're just cashing checks and hoping nobody notices that you stopped trying years ago. That was the breaking point. Mark stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward with the force of his movement. The sudden action sent a ripple of shock through the studio audience. Are you kidding me right now? Mark demanded, his Boston accent thickening with emotion. You think this is some kind of joke? You think my career is something you can just tear apart for your amusement? Colbert remained seated, still wearing that infuriating smirk. Mark, please sit down. This is just a conversation between professionals. Professionals? Mark repeated incredulously. A professional doesn't ambush his guest on live television. A professional doesn't use his platform to humiliate someone who came here in good faith. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of what was quickly becoming one of the most explosive moments in late-night television history. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether to applaud, boo, or simply watch in stunned silence. You know what your problem is, Stephen? Mark said, still standing, his voice carrying the weight of years of built-up frustration. You hide behind this desk, behind these cameras, and you think that gives you the right to judge people who are actually out there taking risks? Colbert's expression shifted slightly. For the first time since the interview began, his cocky demeanor wavered just a fraction, but he recovered quickly, leaning back in his chair with calculated casualness. Taking risks? Colbert scoffed. Mark, making the same movie 15 times isn't taking risks. It's playing it safe. It's giving the studio exactly what they expect from Mark Wahlberg. The same movie? Mark's voice rose another notch. Are you serious right now? Do you have any idea what goes into what I do? The preparation, the physical demands, the emotional investment? Oh, please. Colbert waved his hand dismissively. Physical demands? You mean working out and looking angry at the camera? That's not acting, Mark. That's just being Mark Wahlberg in different costumes. The audience was completely captivated now, watching what felt like a real fight unfold before their eyes. Some were pulling out their phones, trying to capture this moment that was clearly going to be talked about for years. Mark took a step closer to the desk, his hands clenched at his sides. You want to talk about acting? Let me tell you something about acting. It's about truth. It's about bringing something real to every character, even when the material isn't perfect. It's about connecting with people who see something of themselves in what you're doing. Truth? Colbert laughed again, that same cold sound. The truth is that you've built a career on playing the same character over and over again. Tough guy from Boston with a heart of gold. We get it, Mark. We've all seen it 100 times. And what exactly have you built your career on? Mark shot back, his patience finally snapping completely. Sitting behind a desk, making jokes about people who are actually out there doing something meaningful? At least when I make a movie, I'm trying to entertain people, to give them something they can enjoy. What do? You tear people down for laughs. Colbert's face flushed slightly. He wasn't used to guests fighting back this hard, and it was clearly throwing him off his game. I inform people, Mark. I provide commentary on our culture, including the movies that shape it. Commentary? Mark practically spat the word. Is that what you call this? Because from where I'm standing, this looks like a hit job. You brought me on here with the promise of a normal interview, and instead you spent the entire time trying to destroy my reputation. Maybe your reputation can't handle a little honest criticism, Colbert replied, but there was less confidence in his voice now. Honest criticism? Mark repeated. There's nothing honest about what you're doing. You're not critiquing my work. You're attacking me personally. There's a difference, and you know it. The studio was so quiet you could hear the hum of the cameras. Even the production crews seemed frozen, unsure whether to keep rolling or cut to commercial. This was uncharted territory for late-night television. Look, Mark continued, his voice slightly calmer but still carrying that dangerous edge. I've been doing this for over 25 years. I've worked with some of the greatest directors in the world. I've been nominated for Academy Awards. I've built a production company that creates opportunities for other people. And you're going to sit there and tell me I don't know how to act? Colbert straightened in his chair, sensing he was losing control of the situation. Awards don't always mean quality, Mark. Sometimes they just mean you're popular. And what would you know about quality? Mark demanded. When's the last time you created anything that wasn't designed to tear someone else down? When's the last time you put yourself out there? Really put yourself on the line for something you believed in? Every night, Colbert replied defensively. Every night I come out here and give my honest opinion about the world we live in. Your honest opinion? Mark said slowly. Or just whatever gets you the biggest laugh? Because there's a difference between honesty and cruelty, Stephen. And right now, you're showing everyone in this room exactly which one you prefer. The words hit their mark. Colbert's face went pale, and for a moment, he seemed genuinely speechless. The audience was starting to murmur among themselves, clearly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing. You know what I think this is really about? Mark continued, pressing his advantage. I think you're jealous. I think you look at actors, and you see people who get to create, who get to tell stories, who get to connect with audiences in a way that you never will. That's ridiculous, Colbert protested. But his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Mark challenged. Because you're not content to just do your show and let other people do theirs. You have to tear them down, make them look small, so you can feel bigger. That's not comedy, Stephen. That's just sad. Colbert was visibly struggling now, his usual quick wit failing him completely. He looked to his notes, shuffled them nervously, then looked back at Mark with something approaching desperation. Mark, I think you're overreacting here, he tried weakly. This is just how these interviews go sometimes. No, Mark said firmly. This is how your interviews go. This is what you've turned this show into. A place where you can hide behind jokes and pretend that cruelty is the same thing as cleverness. The audience was beginning to shift their sympathy clearly. What had started as an attack on Mark was now revealing itself as something much uglier. Colbert was no longer the witty host in control. He was a bully who had finally been called out. I've worked with talk show hosts all over the world, Mark continued, his voice gaining strength with every word. Good ones, great ones, people who know how to have a conversation, how to bring out the best in their guests. They ask tough questions, sure, but they do it with respect. They do it because they want to learn something, not because they want to humiliate someone. Colbert was sweating now, his carefully constructed persona crumbling before everyone's eyes. Mark, please, let's just move on to the next segment. Move on? Mark laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think you can just attack someone like that and then move on when it doesn't go your way? You think you can tear apart 25 years of someone's work and then just change the subject? I was just doing my job, Colbert said weakly. Your job? Mark's voice rose again. Your job is to entertain people, to inform them, maybe even to inspire them. Your job isn't to destroy people for sport. And if you think it is, then maybe you're in the wrong business. The studio fell silent again. Mark was breathing heavily, his anger still evident but now mixed with something else. Disappointment, sadness, even. He looked around at the audience, at the cameras, at the production crew who were all staring at him with a mixture of shock and admiration. You know what the real tragedy is here? Mark said, his voice now carrying a weight that filled every corner of the studio. I actually used to respect you, Stephen. I used to think you were one of the smart ones, someone who understood that comedy could lift people up instead of tearing them down. Colbert looked like he had been punched in the gut. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass, taking a sip to buy himself time to think of a response that never came. Mark shook his head slowly, the disappointment evident in every gesture. But this isn't comedy, is it? This is just mean-spirited garbage, designed to make you feel superior. And the worst part is, you're doing it to someone who came here as your friend. Mark won. Colbert started, but his voice cracked slightly. No, Mark cut him off sharply. You had your chance to talk. You spent the last 10 minutes attacking everything I've worked for, everything I've built. Now it's my turn. The audience was completely transfixed. This wasn't just an argument anymore. This was a masterclass in dignity under fire, and everyone in the room could feel it. You want to know what real acting is? Mark continued, his Boston accent thickening with emotion. Real acting is about vulnerability. It's about opening yourself up to the possibility of failure, of rejection, of people like you tearing you apart just for trying. Every time I step in front of a camera, I'm putting a piece of myself out there for the world to judge. Colbert sat frozen, his usual arsenal of quips and comebacks completely depleted. And, yeah, Mark went on, maybe I'm not the greatest actor who ever lived. Maybe I don't have the range of some other guys. But you know what I do have? I have heart. I have respect for the people who pay their hard-earned money to see my movies. I have gratitude for the opportunities I've been given." His voice rose again, passion bleeding through every word. "I've never forgotten where I came from, Stephen. I've never forgotten that kid from Dorchester who thought Hollywood was just a dream. And every role I take, every movie I make, I'm thinking about that kid and kids like him who might see something in what I'm doing that makes them believe they can achieve something too." The studio was so quiet that the sound of someone shifting in their seat seemed to echo. Colbert looked smaller somehow, diminished by the raw honesty of Mark's words. "But you," Mark continued, pointing directly at his host, "you've forgotten what it's like to build something instead of just tearing it down. You've gotten so comfortable in this chair, behind this desk, that you think other people's dreams and careers are just material for your jokes." Colbert finally found his voice, though it was barely above a whisper. I don't." "Yes, you do," Mark said firmly. "Because if you didn't, you never would have brought me on here just to humiliate me. You would have asked me real questions about my work, about my process, about what drives me. Instead, you decided to make me into a punchline." The cameras continued to roll, capturing every second of what was clearly going to be dissected and analyzed for years to come. This wasn't just television anymore. This was a cultural moment. "I've made mistakes in my life," Mark said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I've said things I regret, done things I wish I could take back. But you know what I've never done? I've never used my platform to deliberately hurt someone who trusted me enough to be vulnerable." Colbert's face was now completely flushed, beads of sweat visible on his forehead despite the studio's air conditioning. "And that's what this is really about, isn't it?" Mark pressed on relentlessly. "Trust. I trusted you enough to come on your show, to sit in this chair, to have what I thought would be a normal conversation. And you betrayed that trust the moment you decided to turn this into your personal roast of Mark Wahlberg." The audience was beginning to stir, and not in Colbert's favor. Scattered applause broke out from different sections, people clearly showing their support for Mark's defense of himself. "You want to know what the difference is between us?" Mark asked, his voice now calm but carrying incredible force. "When I make a movie, even if it's not perfect, I'm trying to give people something. Entertainment, escape, maybe even inspiration. When you do this show, you're just taking cheap shots, taking easy laughs, taking other people's dignity and turning it into content." Colbert looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. His usual smugness had been completely stripped away, leaving behind someone who looked genuinely ashamed of what he had done. Mark took a step back from the desk, straightening his jacket with deliberate precision. "I came here tonight to talk about a movie I'm proud of, to connect with people who might enjoy it. Instead, I got ambushed by someone who thinks cruelty is the same thing as wit." The studio fell silent again as Mark looked directly into the main camera, speaking not to Colbert, but to everyone watching at home. If you're out there and you have dreams, if you're working towards something that matters to you, don't let people like this convince you that you're not good enough. Don't let anyone make you feel small just so they can feel big. He turned back to Colbert one final time, his eyes blazing with controlled fury. "And Stephen, if this is what your show has become, if this is what you think entertainment looks like, then you've lost sight of everything that made you worth watching in the first place." Colbert opened his mouth as if to respond, but no words came out. He looked defeated, embarrassed, completely outmatched by the moral authority of the man he had tried to humiliate. Mark nodded once, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both disappointment and finality. "I think we're done here." Without another word, Mark turned and walked toward the exit, his steps measured and dignified. The audience erupted in applause, a thunderous sound that seemed to shake the entire studio. People were on their feet, cheering not just for Mark's defense of himself, but for the way he had handled the entire situation with class and integrity. Colbert remained frozen at his desk, the sound of the applause seeming to physically pain him. His producers were frantically gesturing from off-camera, but he seemed unable to process what they were trying to tell him. Mark paused at the edge of the stage, not looking back but somehow commanding the attention of everyone in the room. The applause continued, growing even louder as people realized they were witnessing something historic. Then he was gone, disappearing behind the curtain and leaving behind a studio full of people who had just watched a masterclass in dignity under fire. Colbert sat alone at his desk, his carefully constructed world of controlled chaos completely shattered by one man's refusal to be diminished. The cameras kept rolling for several more seconds, capturing Colbert's stunned expression and the continued applause from an audience that had clearly chosen their side. Finally, mercifully, someone called for a commercial break, and the red lights on the cameras went dark. But the damage was done. In the span of less than 15 minutes, Stephen Colbert had been completely dismantled by a guest who had simply refused to accept being treated with anything less than basic human respect, and Mark Wahlberg had shown everyone watching exactly what real strength looked like.